Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us today. It's 4 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know some people have to leave pretty close to 5 or right at 5, so we're going to try to get our conversation started. I really want to give a big thanks for everyone for joining us today and a hearty welcome. I do want to give a bit of a public service announcement because we will be talking about mental health and wellness. Today, this discussion is just a discussion. It's to bring up some topics and to offer resources to our students here at Triton College. It is not meant to be a substitution for a visit with a counselor, a therapy session, or a doctor's appointment. If you feel like you have a mental health emergency, please dial 911 for immediate help. If you are seeking someone to talk to, or you feel like you need additional resources regarding mental health and wellness, please call the Triton College Counseling Center at 708-456-0300, extension 3588, or you can email counsel@triton.edu. Also, at the end of this discussion, we will provide some community resources and community partners that you can get some additional help from. So that's just our Triton College Counseling Department information right there. Anyone want to take note of it? Please do. And let's get our conversation started. So today we have with us from campus, Leslie Wester, one of our Triton College counselors. We also have with us Kevyn Porter. He is a student success advisor here with the Triumph program. In addition, I've also invited some local mental health professionals to join us. Let me get my slide up again. Sorry, guys. Where's my share screen? I've invited Dr. Arturo Carrillo. He is the director of Health and Violence Prevention for the Collaborative for Community Wellness. I've also invited Mr. Matt Lawson, who is a licensed professional counselor. He specializes in men's wellness, healthy lifestyle creation, anxiety management and recovery, and video game addiction. I've also invited Dr. Obari Cartman, who is a community psychologist and restorative practices coach. He is the immediate past president of the Chicago chapter of Black Psychologists Association. And just a note that this discussion is part of our Black History Month celebration. So again, thank you all for joining. How do I stop sharing? There we go. So 2020 was a challenging year. We experienced the beginning of the global pandemic, which is still ongoing. We are dealing with nationwide racial tension and social justice activism and protests. We also have had a recent change in the presidential administration. While all of these things are going on, our students are juggling with their schoolwork, work, jobs, internships, volunteerism. Our students have family obligations, friends and social life, and possibly sports and other things that they're interested in. But now on top of that, they've had to adjust to online school and or remote work and just the general uncertainty of the current environment. I wanted to have this discussion to take a beat and say, it's okay to not be okay. But as we recognize that, at the same time, let's find some ways to get guidance and also give support. So I would like to begin our discussion with if our panelists can chime in and help us define what exactly is mental health.
I don't mind getting that going. I think we can, it can be this can be a pretty individualized sense of ourself, right? What may be mentally healthy for one person could be pretty different for another person. So, I think when you think of just global mental health, it's a consideration around the things that you have going on in your life, the balance that you have with those things, and then also, how apt you are, I guess, to be able to deal with the challenges that arise in your life, and your ability to work through those, or know how to reach out for support.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Does anyone else want to chime in on how they define mental health?
I would say, again, this is Kevyn Border, Student Success Advisor for the Triumph program here at Triton College. I would say that mental health is your ability to navigate your life's challenges. It really hones in on stability, tranquility, and what it means to be able to overcome adverse situations.
Great, thank you, Kevyn. With those two definitions or experiences being explained, I would like to ask a specific question. Can someone help me understand and help our students understand what is the difference between feeling down or just kind of being sad versus actually being depressed or having depression? And I asked that question to get into helping students understand and recognize some things that they might be going through and when it's time to seek out some help. So I'll rephrase the question again. Does someone want to chime in and talk about the difference between feeling down and having depression?
Well, I could start. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training. So I've been, not currently, but for the first 10 years of my career, I was offering mental health services, and we were providing those free services to anyone in the community on Chicago's west side and southwest side. I definitely agree with the previous commentators that absolutely mental health is everything. It really is at the core of, our well-being, our connection with others, our connection with our family, with our friends. And really, it does also regulate how we deal with those challenges in our lives. I would just add, to me also, mental health is a human right, and access to mental health care should be available for everybody because it's so essential to our well-being. One of the things that, I would see as a clinician is that people, we get used to dealing with hardships. We get used to dealing with, whatever life throws at us, and it does get us down, right? The way I would describe it to people I'd work with is the difference between like feeling down and depressed is, when you're feeling down, you know that things are hard, but you still feel like you have the motivation. You still feel like you have the capacity to keep moving. When you cross into depression, it's like you feel defeated. You feel like deflated. There is no energy to give anymore. And you're feeling like to keep going is coming at all costs, right? There's a threshold that we can't cross, and that becomes an area that becomes problematic and starts impacting multiple areas of our lives. Whereas sometimes where we feel down, we can, tune it out, move on to something else. Being depressed really kind of cuts across our relationships with others, cuts across with our energy to do work, to engage with school, right? It really kind of cuts through many aspects of our life, and it could be long lasting, right? It could be something we've been dealing with for, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. And at that point, my recommendation has always been, the sooner we get to talk to somebody, the sooner we can get help for whatever we're going through, the better, right? Prevention is always the best medicine. So getting that support whenever you're feeling this is going on for a little too long, or it's feeling a little too intense for me, that's probably when you start asking yourself that question, that's probably where and when you need to start looking for some support.
Great, thank you for that. Also, how would you describe being depressed looks like, or how, maybe a better question is, if you feel like you might be experiencing depression, in what ways could it impact your school performance, or in what ways could it impact your personality? And again, I'm just asking this question to help bring up some examples. These are not definitive, but just to bring up some examples of when students should be aware of what's going on and seek out some help.
I'll chime in. This is Obari, Cartman. I love the question about the students. I think we have to be very specific about what are some of the things we need to pay attention to. And saying paying attention just reminds me that that's the first thing we should always try to do is pay close attention to ourselves and notice those shifts. The hustle, the rat race gets us so trying to be busy in motion and filling up our calendars. Capitalism requires a certain productivity, right? And then our worth is assigned to how much we can, how many meetings we can attend and how much grades we get and how many jobs we can apply for, those kind of things. And I think that what it means to slow down, to pay attention, to find those signs in your body requires a level of like silence and patience and mindfulness and presence of self, so that you can tell when your shoulders a little more tense than normal, or your stomach is churning more, of your whether it's anxiety or depression. This your body will tell you first. So it's important to pay attention to yourself and to notice those shifts. It's the shifts that's most important to pay attention to, even with things that you normally love to do. If you start to find that you're not as motivated to do those things, or if they don't bring you the same kind of joy, and it's important also to have community. So if someone also notices, it might not be like a clinical diagnosis, but they could say, you seem a little off lately. Or if you see somebody, you got a friend or a loved one or young people in your life, and you say there's the dimming, the light in your eyes a little less dim than normal, right? Like those subtle shifts make a big difference in our function and our well-being. And I think the first thing that it attaches to is your motivation. So if you're a student and you're trying to find out why you later than normal to class, why you skipping more than often, we call it procrastination. We're putting off these things, but a lot of that, there's emotional pain and trauma and hurt that we have not resolved that gets in the way of our motivation for these kind of things. And so I think the first thing to do is to check off some boxes. If you're slower in the morning, it could be because you're tired. You might just need to rest more to check out if am I sleepy or am I sad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I hungry or am I hangry? Like some of it is just basic things that we need to take care of ourselves. And then once those things are checked off, I got enough sleep, I'm paying attention to my relationships, everything seems to be fine, I'm eating good. If there's some lingering feelings that are keeping me from being motivated, from going to class and moving forward, then there might be something else to pay attention to. And often it's very, very subtle. And as Dr. Carrillo said, the prevention is much more important. Like you don't want to wait till it gets
Too
chaotic.
bad. Mm-hmm.
You want to catch it very early. Like something seems off. And just that, like something seems off. I don't feel, Brother Matt talking about balance. I don't feel as balanced anymore. The things are coming at me, and they're not bouncing off as easy as they used to be. They're starting to stick more. Like those subtle things, we just got to pay attention to, and then keep tabs on each other so that we can share those kind of things with each other. You seem like you've been a little grumpy lately, right? Those subtle signs are very, very important to pay attention to.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cartman. Another distinction I'd like for us to dive into is maybe Leslie, you can help me out here a little bit. Can we talk about maybe the difference between feeling a little nervous or being unsure versus actually having anxiety?
Sure. I really loved that presence of self, and I think that can be applied in all sorts of different areas. So I may have to borrow and utilize that more in the future. So thank you. But there's a range, right? And what happens is we always feel these different things, and there's a limit to where it's normal for you to feel a little excited, a little bit nervous about something new. For our students, it could be, they have a big exam coming up. They might have those butterflies in their stomach. They might have a little bit of a racing thought or physiological symptoms, right, where they might feel their heart rate going up. that versus, oh my gosh, what's going to happen the next time I have an exam, and going into that almost spiraling before you even have something to be concerned about, being concerned about it. That's one of the easier ways that I work with a lot of our students who are experiencing test anxiety, but it can be, that can be expanded into any other sort of anxiety, where right now with everything that we're living through, there's so many different things that our students come forward and are like, I just feel off and I can't stop thinking about X, or I can't stop thinking about Y, and I don't know why. That could be a sign that you're experiencing some anxiety. And when it comes back to mental health and self-care, you know, there's a number of things that you can do to kind of help combat that. But if it gets to a certain point where it's really impacting your day-to-day life, that's when you really need to be seeking some help. And hopefully, as Dr. Carrillo said, seeking it before it gets to the fact that it's really impacting your life, for the prevention piece. And Dr. Cartman said it as well, of like just being aware. When you feel that that's off, raise your hand and say, maybe I need to talk to somebody. And that, I would say that's the biggest thing, is it's normal to feel nervous. It's normal, whatever normal is, to feel a range of emotions. It's when it can negatively impact your life that it starts to become that bigger issue. You're muted, Meredith.
I'm notorious for doing that. I do have a question from a participant, which I'm excited to get, because we're having some participation, but also it's right on this topic. As a parent or as a caregiver or as a guardian, what are things that someone can do in that role to help their child or to help the student in their home? I've been asking a lot from the student perspective, but what can parents do to help children who are experiencing anxiety?
If I talk on that a little bit, I have a couple of different jobs I'm doing right now. I have private practice. I also do a lot of online therapy for this online therapy group, and we're seeing a lot of teens coming in right now from this pandemic that are really struggling with anxiety and depression. And then, you know, a lot of the things that people have been alluding to up to this point about anxiety and depression are very much so spot on, right? You can have this situational anxiety and depression, but you can also have a state of being that is a state of anxiousness and a state of depressed feelings. And, you know, as a loved one, as somebody that's supported or wants to support somebody that they see struggling with anxiety and depression, it still kind of surprises me how many people I talk to that tell me mental health isn't something that we talk about in our house, that tell me depression and anxiety is not something that we talk about in our house. And they don't feel safe talking to significant others, to parents, about what they're going through and what they're dealing with. You know, and you know, like when you think of the stigma that can oftentimes be attached to these issues, to mental health, it's not too surprising. And then, you know, I'm hoping things like this will bring this more to the forefront and make this more of an open conversation that people can have. But creating that environment for your children, that they know that this is a not only a safe topic to talk about, but a welcomed topic to talk about. That they have that space to talk about their feelings, to talk about their thoughts. One of a really great conversation I had recently with somebody was their son had been thinking about death. You know, nothing like suicidal, nothing like whatever. This is a 13-year-old thinking about just death in general. And he, you know, him being able to create this space for his son to just talk about this without fear, without feeling of repercussion, without this sense that this could be taken some way, was really refreshing, and it led to a really nice conversation between this individual and his son.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. And on that topic, one of the reasons I really wanted to have this discussion, and one of the reasons we're recording it and going to make it available to students later, I really want to add to the movement to help normalize talk therapy, not just for students and not just in the Black community, but in community in general. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask Leslie, Kevyn, and our panelists, what are some things that students can do to help prevent, and Dr. Carrillo touched on this earlier, to help prevent a mental health concern developing into a crisis? And when I ask that, I'm thinking we've been talking about getting help, right? Or going to therapy, right? But what are some other things students can incorporate, if it's exercise or yoga or journaling? What are some actual real things we can let people know, try this or try that, in addition to seeking out counseling and therapy? Not everyone raise their hand at the same time.
I was like, Kevyn has his hand up. I was letting him go.
Oh, I didn't see that. Oh my gosh.
So I had my hand up for something else.
Oh, I didn't even see
Hard
that. I don't have my
question.
glasses on. I'm sorry.
I can't see how to take it down, but I'm gonna go with it. I would
Kevyn,
say
you have the floor.
I would say self-care. Self-care is definitely like the go-to, right? You find what makes you happy. No one knows that better than you. So you find what makes you happy, and that's what you do. I would also say checking in with friends, family, people you know who are in your corner and have your best interests at heart. Talking to them about some of the things that you might be struggling with. We talked about seeking counseling and getting that ball rolling, but definitely self-care is like the number one for me.
Well, and
when you say self-care, Kevyn, like, can you give us some examples? You're on mute.
Self-care for me would probably be playing basketball or playing with my dog, or me, I like to ride my motorcycle. That gives me peace. That gives me Sandra, don't look at me like that now. that gives me peace. That gives me time to clear my head and like be one with my thoughts. And another thing, which is probably a little weird, but I like to lay on the floor with the lights off and just think and calm myself. So that's just me personally. Those are just a few that I would recommend. It just depends on what really floats your boat.
Well, and I want to expand on Kevyn's with self-care, normalizing to be okay with taking the time for yourself and not feeling guilty for it. Because we always tend to put ourselves last because all of these other things need to be done. But if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else. And we need to normalize taking care of ourselves and not feeling bad about it.
I would add to that another caveat. Oh no, you got it. Another caveat to the do what makes you happy. I love it. I agree with it, and I think that there are times when we need to have some discernment about things that make us temporarily happy that might cause consequences later down the road. I work a lot with young men, and there's a culture that is giving easy answers to relieving the pain. And if it's, pills, if it's sex, if it's, aggression, if it's making money, whatever it is, it might make you happy now, but we have to be able to think through what is the consequences of this coping strategy that might get me through a moment, but might cause more problems later down the line. And so it also might mean exploring things that might be uncomfortable for you at first. I don't think it sounds weird at all to lay in the dark and think, like just seeking silence, journaling. She mentioned yoga, meditation. These are things that they sound weird at first, but for hundreds of thousands of years in human history, these are things that people have leaned on to find balance and calm. So we just got to restore some of those practices and make that more normal, and have that become something that you don't go to when you're stressed, like something that we just do automatically, as Leslie's saying, as prioritizing wellness as a function of like success, and scheduling in your day like you would a class, just like you would an interview. Like put that, prioritizing that so securely, protecting that time, and doing it in community too is also useful. But there are coping strategies that people have that we go to that cause more problems. We have to be careful about those things.
Thank you, Dr. Cartman. Did anyone else want to add to my last question of what are some things we can do to prevent a concern from becoming a crisis?
I just wanted to echo what was just shared. I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I think the other piece is just to consider giving ourselves like mental breaks, right? The idea that sometimes, social media, right? Especially social media, it's really kind of set up in a way to engage you and to kind of hook you and to keep your emotions engaged in whatever you're reading and whatever is on, trending or whatever you're going through as you're scrolling. And yeah, absolutely, finding moments from calm mind and creating those spaces is absolutely essential. And those distractions may be temporary release, but they're not going to give us kind of overall well-being. So yeah.
Thank you. We did have a question. I want to pause for a question from Julia. Julia, did you want to ask your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. My question was,
hold on. I'm sorry. I'm terrible at this. Can you introduce yourself?
I'm sorry. My name is Julia Willis. I am the Director of Student Support Initiatives over the Triumph and Surge program here at Triton College. My question is, we're talking about mental health. We're talking about young folks. When you talk about younger folks who are teenage years, yes, they have parents who see the signs and say, I'm going to put you in this therapy. But what do we do when we have younger folks in your 20s to 30s who don't really recognize it, that they may have an issue? And also speaking, people of color, when we hear therapy, we think of mental illness. We don't think of mental health, meaning trying to clear our minds, whatever our immediate issues are, so we won't have that crisis. Because when you think about therapy and all that other stuff, they're like, oh, I don't have a problem. Our communities are, you pray it away, grandma will pop you upside the head with the Bible, go and pray it out, you'll be all right. Versus knowing you need to sit with someone to really hash out some of the issues that you have in order to say, hey, I am not okay. And what do you do to pull them in to say, hey, young man, young lady, we need to get some therapy. And it's okay that stigma is not negative, but a positive. So what are you guys doing in that aspect?
I understand the stigma. I get the resistance. I think that some of it's justified because a lot of the ways the training and the license has created the expertise of therapists has done so outside of the context of the cultural sort of norms and values of these communities. And so I went to school, got a whole Ph.D. and learned a lot about Freud and Skinner and Watson and Wilhelm Wundt. I got a bunch of old white men in my brain. And then I got to go back into, the South Side, West Side and deliver services and create healing opportunities. And there's sometimes, a clash. So I think that some of the resistance is real and that a lot of the therapy is designed to reduce harm and to cope and to, manage and to get back to work. But if we're talking about communities of color that really need intergenerational healing, then that has to mean incorporating other things, arts and culture. And for me, I use a lot of drums. I use hip hop. There's programs in barbershops. I think that we have to take some of the therapeutic sort of work outside of the office and sort of sitting on the couch with a notepad. I think that we got to just as a field, we have to do better to meet people where they are and have a understanding of the resistance and find some way to sort of reconcile that in action through motion. Some of the trauma needs to be sweated out. Some of you can't actually talk out, right? So I think that we need to just expand all of our notions of what it means to heal, and not say it's compartmentalized. It's school. Sometimes happens to you pick a major, that's the thing you do, and then you go out and do that thing. But healing is much more dynamic than that. And because the trauma is much more dynamic than that. And so all of us have to engage in these kinds of conversations more and be more creative and innovative and incorporate things that will appeal people, that will bring them to the room. And once they're there, you can have lots of therapeutic conversations, conversations about emotional intelligence. You can give skills, you can do these things, and then not have the same like stigma of this brokenness, this diagnosis, this something's wrong with you kind of feel to it, because that is a problem. Like the way we do that is causes harm in its own way. So I think we need to just be honest about that and be more innovative around what does it look like from our end.
Thank you, Dr. Cartman. Kevin, I see your hand raised. Is it from before, or did you have a new question or comment?
That was the old
I'm good.
hand.
It was from before.
Oh, that's from before. Does someone else have their hand raised? Okay. So Julia brings up a really good point. Over here in my notes, that was what I was moving on to, is that we do have traditional students. We have some traditional students that come directly from high school and start here. So they're like 18 or 19, but the average age of our student is 26. We have a lot of non-traditional students. So they're young adults handling adult life issues. So I would like for Leslie and Kevin to chime in a little bit here and maybe share some things that they're hearing from our students in terms of maybe feeling overwhelmed, or if too much is on their plate, or if they're experiencing some anxiety. And I'm not asking them to bring up specific examples, but just sort of give us a good idea of what some of our students are going through, so then we can talk through that, and then also ask some of our guests to chime in on resources that we could present to our students.
I always wait for Kevin. I'm like, do you want me to go? I'll start because you started the last time, so I'll start this one. A lot of the balancing of all of the things was already a high stress level for our students, and then adding to it the pandemic has been just throwing everything into a tizzy. Once we've almost been at this a year. When we first got thrown into our current way of doing things, a lot of our students didn't have a reliable access to Wi-Fi. So some were coming to campus with their laptop to connect, like to sit in the parking lot and connect, and having to allow that time, or going to a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, or not parking lots in the area that they could access wireless so that they could connect to their classes. And then there was this concern of, how do I keep up, and how do I do all of these things, and what's happening with my job, and how long is this going to last, and is this thing really what it is? And that was our spring. And then as fall came, we had somewhat adjusted to this pandemic life, but now there's other variables that are thrown on there, where it's, my hours at work haven't picked back up, or my hours at work are too much that I can't take on the same school amount that I was doing before, and how is that going to impact me? A lot of the unknown, which can create a huge amount of anxiety, because let's say you're procrastinating because you want to see what's going to happen next, but then nothing is happening the way that you thought it was going to happen, and we're not to a normal, so to speak, yet. So then you're going to keep procrastinating, which is going to keep your anxiety going because you don't know what's next. And it just, spiraling is my best term for anxiety, because that's exactly how it feels. So it's, and then add to it, am I making the right decisions? And it all kind of comes together. And that's what our students are coming to right now. They're like, what if I make the wrong choice? Is this the right thing for me to do?
I think I would echo that spiral comparison. So I've had on the low end, students just not knowing what classes to take. Can they take this certain amount of hours? To things on the high end where I have nursing students who have actually gotten into like down out, drag out verbal altercations with their families because they work at a hospital and their family they don't believe in wearing a mask and they don't believe in social distance. On top of that, he's dealing with juggling his schoolwork and the increased amount of hours that he has to do at work, as well as paying the bills at home. So I think all of those things compounded really uh, uh, increase the likelihood of that depression and anxiety. This point in time has definitely shown us that you have to be willing to adjust, um, but we also have to acknowledge that this isn't normal, right? And that our students are struggling.
Thank you, Kevin. So, Mr. Lawson, based off of what Leslie and Kevin have shared with us, do you have any thoughts on that, or any thoughts on how we can support or offer resources to students that are dealing with these different issues of being overwhelmed and dealing with the pandemic because they're directly impacted by it through work and just some of the other things?
Yeah. First off, I think just the fact that you're doing this meeting and providing this sense of community to people and allowing people to know that there are individuals out there that absolutely are there to support and help them. Kind of bouncing off that last question a little bit, and that sense of people having these spaces and knowing that they have these spaces to talk. I think it's going to be very important. And because of the pandemic, I think we are at a very, very unique time in just the history of getting support, that a lot of therapists are now online. I think that's a big barrier that has been reduced now. So that person that may have been out of your way before to go into their office and take time away from your classes to go sit down and do an hour-long appointment or whatever. Now they're online. You don't have to go anywhere. You have access to them if you have internet. And I think that's something that people can absolutely take advantage of. I have clients that have no interest in seeing me back in my office again because of the commute that they had to do downtown. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the fact that they know that they can go home to their space, be comfortable in that space, and talk about their needs. They don't need to come to my office to do that. If anything, I like the fact that some of this has happened and shown people that they can take advantage of therapy without necessarily having to jump through hoops to get their needs met.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. So we have a question in the chat, which is very interesting. It deals with, the question is, how do you all feel about going to therapy with someone that does not look like you? And in addition to wanting to normalize talk therapy and normalize talking about mental health in the Black community, I wanted to have this conversation as a part of Black History Month. But we are also a Hispanic serving institution, and more than 40% of our student body is Latinx. And then we also obviously have white students, and then other students that make up different ethnicities, and nationalities. So maybe can we talk about the positives of searching out someone that looks for you, that looks like you, and how do people in Black and Brown communities do that? You know, what are some resources they can go to or use if that's something important to them?
I can start there. Um, I love the question. I think it's an important question. My take on it is that what you really want in a therapist has to do with fit, what you were looking for, and what it means for you to have a good therapist. It depends on lots of different variables. Sometimes it's what they look like, but not always. There are some advantages to being in a room where someone understands your culture, can speak some of the same language. It takes less time to feel understood. And I think that's important to feel like, man, he gets me, like she gets me. Like that's an important part of it. But there's times when, you know, somebody could get you and you feel seen and understood, but because they're so similar to you, they may or may not help you get past whatever you got to. And that could be the end of it. Yeah, no, I feel you, bro. That's tough. And then y'all just sitting there staring at each other, right? A good therapist, wherever their background is, they can connect with you. And part of the work sometimes might be trying to explain your situation, your culture, your experience. That the articulation of it is a part of the therapy. So if someone may seem far from you because they might be a different gender, a different race, a different socioeconomic status, they might not actually understand some of the things you're saying, and you have to do the work to express yourself, and that can be really valuable in and of itself. Just to finding the right words to tell your story, to be seen and heard by someone that may be different, because their differences could give them a vantage point that could see a different path than someone that sees you, someone that gets you easily. So I mean, really, all it depends on what you need, what you want. But a good therapist, whatever their race, gender, will find a way to connect you and help you guide through whatever you need to get through. The understanding, the like camaraderie, the relationship. Sometimes the ease of it could be a barrier to you really doing the work to get past where you already are. So I think it depends a lot. I created a directory to answer your second question, blackmentalhealthdirectory.com, of Chicago-based Black clinicians. But like they just Black on face, right? They're not necessarily Black in heart or in value system, or you never really know who a person is just because of how they look. So it's much more difficult work than trying to find a match based on what a skin tone is. The work has much more to do with relationships, values, timings, what you need. Those things I think are more important to pay attention to than the skin color of a person.
Thank you, Dr. Cartman. Arturo, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree. I totally agree. You know, as a male clinician, I was always very sensitive that I'm not female, right? I'm not, as a son of Mexican immigrants, I myself wasn't an immigrant, right? So I had to know what my own limitations were as far as understanding, and really it does take that sense of humility, and clinicians have to, the clinician you find has to be really open to learning who you are as well, right? And that's Dr. Cartman brought up a good point. Just by acknowledging that somebody looks like me doesn't mean that they understand me. And again, it is part of the process. For me, one of the things that my research has been focused on is thinking about who has access to choices and can have options for seeking out counseling and who doesn't, right? And I think that's part of the equation here, because it's just like finding a doctor, right? When you want to see a doctor, you want to find somebody you're comfortable with. And it may take a few tries, you may have to change doctors, and that's okay. I think that's something I've always recommended. If you go to a therapist and it doesn't quite seem like a fit, it's okay, find another one, right? Like there should be options. Unfortunately, the system we live in right now, and my research has been exclusively in Chicago, so this may not be applying to other parts of the region. But when we map out where therapists are in the city of Chicago, you find that low-income communities of color have the least amount of access to therapists. When we look at the hard numbers, and we've done the research on this, 70% of the city lives in communities that have less than 0.2 therapists per 1,000 community residents. Whereas certain communities, mostly the North Shore and North Side, have 4 or more therapists per 1,000 community residents, right? So the disparity in access is a big part of also why our communities of color don't seek out counseling services, right? We almost have no choice but to pray it out, right? And that's part of, our campaign and our policy efforts have been about providing equity to access to care in local communities of color, because again, people don't have that choice. what I'm hearing is Triton College gives you all as students an opportunity. Please take full advantage of that to seek out counseling services. You know, myself, when I first went to therapy, it was just after, actually, when I was doing my master's in social work. That's when I first started therapy, and I've been in therapy for years since. Actually, I don't think I could think of a time in recent past where I have not been in therapy, because there's always something you could work on. There's always something you can reflect on. And for us as therapists, we also need our own space to work out kind of some of the things that we're working with and supporting others, right? So, you know, if you're a caregiver, if you're just dealing with, I mean, I think today with everything we're going through in this entire pandemic and life has, I don't see why we wouldn't be in therapy right now, all of us. So if you have the opportunity, I really encourage you, take advantage of it, take care of yourself. It's really beautiful. Find that fit for yourself and really give yourself that space.
I do want to reiterate that Triton College students, we do have our counseling department right here on campus. It's a resource you can go to, call or email, and we have Leslie on here with us. And since we're on this topic, Leslie, I want to ask, students obviously can come to the department, and you also gave me that list of community partners.
Yes.
I'm going to show the list at the end of the discussion, but can you maybe talk just a little bit about some of the community partners? Well, let me do this first. Let's talk about some of the resources they can get from you in the counseling department, right? Because that should be our first stop.
Yes.
And then let's talk about some of our community partners. Is that
yeah?
Okay.
Sounds perfect. That's why I unmuted. I was like, can I just jump in real quick?
No, yeah, I was like, I want to bring you in on this part.
No. So what's wonderful, one of the wonderful things that's come out of the pandemic is accessibility to meeting with someone. So we are doing telehealth right now, which means students do not need to come to campus. We can do a phone call or we can do a video conference for appointments and work with students where they're at. So we provide personal counseling for students. If we feel that they need more than what we can provide them, we have a list of resources that we can give them, but we really do work with our students one-on-one to help them with their personal goals. Many of us have are licensed therapists, so that's the ones who are going to work with students who come to us for things like anxiety and depression. We also have 2 counselors who are more of a wellness focus, who work with students when they're feeling overwhelmed or down, to your point earlier. But it's up to us to make those decisions. For the most part, we'll be able to do that. So there are 5 of us. And again, right now, to make an appointment, you would call or you would email, and we would, complete an intake with you to figure out the best person to meet with, to get you to where you want to be. And this is all free to current Triton College students. In addition to that, we also have a number of workshops that we're doing over the course of the semester, and Meredith has that information as well. These are a little bit more light. Mine is a Feel Good Friday. So typically the first Friday of the month, it's just a time to kind of get together and just be lifted up. And then we have breathing techniques, we have mindfulness workshops, all sorts of things like that, and a lot of resources on our website as well for that. If for some reason you don't feel comfortable or don't want to meet with one of us for an extended period of time, we can also refer you to our student assistance plan, which is Perspectives. We also work with Sarah's Inn, which assists with domestic violence concerns. Local to the community is Light and Family Services, which also is currently doing telehealth. They also have what's called a living room situation, where it's not necessarily full-on therapy, but it's also just kind of checking in, having peers to kind of talk to. That's done. I think they are starting to do some mass socially distance in person for that, but it is also done virtually. And then NAMI is just down the street in Oak Park, which is part of our community as well. Pillars is another resource. So we have lots of resources. I know I'm forgetting some because that was a pretty long list I gave you, Meredith, but these are just some of the partners that we work with. And we're happy to connect any of our students with these resources, or work with you ourselves one-on-one and provide you this. So this is all available to all currently enrolled Triton College students.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. And I'm trying to show, Dimitri, can you see my screen? Okay. I'm not the best with the screen share. You think it'd be pretty straightforward for me. So I'm showing the community partners right now. We'll include this on the website when this conversation is posted. But I did want to, since you were talking about them, I did want to show that really quickly in case anyone wanted to jot down names or take a screenshot or something like that. But I'll show it again later, and it will be on the website also. Okay. Just rearranging my screen here. Thank you, everyone who is participating and asking questions. Do we have anything else in the chat? All right. Now, we did talk about, I did mention how we have traditional and non-traditional students. We are a community college. So with students that have varying educational goals. So a lot of our students do come here to do an associate's degree and then transfer, or maybe do a year or a semester of classes and then transfer to another college or university. I was recently in a different discussion that I heard something that was very interesting to me, and I did want to pose it to the group, is that sometimes our students transfer and then struggle to find community at their new university or college. Struggle with feelings of not fitting in, or because they did 2 years in community college and then transferred to their new college, just kind of not finding their way to different resources or places to study. I heard a story of students going to another university and then but still coming back to Triton's campus to study or to use the library because that's what they're comfortable with. That's what they recognize. That's what is helpful for them. So I'm just wondering if, one, I would like to know if Kevyn and Leslie have heard instances of that. And then maybe two, if our panelists that I invited could maybe give some suggestions about what students could do to feel like they're fitting in at their new college. There's a two-part question. Is that too much at once?
So two-parter. So the first portion, I believe that students come back because Triton gives that community feel. We're developing right now a total wraparound service for our students. That welcoming care that's going around. We try our hardest to provide that to our students, and I think that's what brings them back. Knowing that they have that support, knowing that every door on campus that has an office to it, that door is open for them to come in and talk and, talk about life's challenges as well as their life's goals, and building those relationships. Being in student support services has given me the opportunity to create lasting relationships. Even though I've only been here for about a year, I've created relationships with students who have graduated and came back, and they want to talk about career choices and what should they do about living on a new campus and interacting with new people. So I think that Triton just gives them that homey feel, right? And that's one thing that we strive to do here, is to totally just give our students everything that we have so that they can be their best inside the classroom as well as outside the classroom as well.
And we see that too. I've been here for 10 years, and it's just, you make those connections. But I always encourage students to be as involved as possible while they're here to get practice. So that way, when they transfer to another institution, they've got that safety net of they've done some of this here, and now they can try it at another place and get more and more comfortable with making those connections.
Any comments from our therapists that could be helpful tips or resources for our students, particularly students of color that are trying to make the transition to a different college or university, or just feeling like they don't quite fit in? Things they should seek out or try to do?
Yeah, I went back to school for therapy like in my early 30s, almost mid 30s, and it was a little bit of an adjustment period, right? Being amongst a group of people that a lot of them were younger than I was, significantly younger than I was in some cases, and I made a lot of assumptions kind of early on about the situation. I made a lot of assumptions about me being able to fit in two groups of people, and I did. I spent a good probably half of that first year just kind of doing it on my own and kind of like doing my thing and just not thinking that I'm going to find that connection with anybody else. And something that I found that was really helpful for me during that time was dropping some of those preconceived notions about my situation, about the sense that people will be accepting and like me and want to be around me because of the person that I am. And some of the people I'm 10 years out of that program, and I still keep up with a lot of people that I made friendships with when I was in my master's program. So I think just people just being open to the idea that despite the differences, despite what you might think, there's actually more of a community there than you realize.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Anyone else want to chime in? We have a few minutes left. I promised people about an hour or so.
I can add real quickly to that. I know the quality of my relationships got better once I sort of gave up the idea that I needed to have a lot of people around. That the smaller my circles got, the more quality relationships I got, and the more impactful my work became, really. And social media, as somebody mentioned earlier, has this way of tricking us into thinking that you got to have a bunch of likes and followers and to be cool, all that kind of stuff. And I think that it's really important to find your tribe, and that could be 2-3 people. There's 2-3 people that feel like they need to find 2-3 people, and y'all just got to find each other. And to that point, there's no way around putting a little effort into it, and sometimes stepping outside of your comfort zone and trying something new, tapping into something that you're really into and being open and honest about that. And once you do that, once you put that out there, then somebody will connect to that. There's no way to do it while you're sitting at home and sort of staying stuck in your own kind of thing. So it takes a little bit of work. It might be a little bit uncomfortable at first, but there are people out there that are waiting to connect with you as long as you have good intentions and are tapping into the things that you really love and enjoy doing.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cartman. I'm being told that Claudia has her hand raised, but I don't see it on my screen. Are you there, Claudia?
I was just clapping. It wasn't a hand raise.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thanks. All right. I promised Leslie that I would show the upcoming workshops. The counseling department is going to have, again, me with the screen share. Hold on a second. Can everyone see that? And again, this will be online and attached to this conversation, but I did want to run through it since I promised Leslie, and she also mentioned it earlier. So we see some Mindful Mondays, Mental Health Mondays with Tracy Wright, Take Charge Tuesdays, and Feel Good Fridays with Leslie. We're coming towards the end of our time here. I want to be able to wrap up the discussion. However, if there's anyone that has a question or doesn't want to raise their hand or ask it, but wants to pop it in the chat real quick, I'll allow a couple minutes for that. While I'm waiting to see if anyone has questions in the chat or raises their hands, I do want to thank our panelists for joining us today. Dr. Cartman, Mr. Matt Lawson, and Dr. Carrillo. I also really want to thank Kevyn and Leslie, who helped me put this together and helped me come up with topics. And I really want to thank all of our participants for logging in and listening and joining in. Once the link is up on the website, I hope you share it with your students and with your friends. I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat. Hold on. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time. It's 5 o'clock, I promised an hour. So we're going to sign out here. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to email me. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.